we are moving through the school year, my brother, and I need to ask you. Um, I knew that solo and ensemble was coming every year. That's what I think we're going to wind up talking about today.
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask you, Mike, is that one of those things that most band directors go solo and ensemble? I got to do it, or or because I think that I remember my director saying, "Hey, you need to do this, and you need to do a solo. You need to do at least one ensemble." And it was still kind of a sales job. It felt like that he had to do to get us involved. But I did one every year through high school, and
Yeah.
I was honestly I was going to go grab some of my medals to show you that they're still there.
It's
But
funny.
and even the state solo and ensemble aspect of it. And so there's several things uh, that I want to ask you related to that.
Okay.
But the first question I want to ask you: are we talking? Let's just go ahead and look behind the curtain to start with. Solo and ensemble, necessary evil, or solo and ensemble? Man, what a great way to improve my band.
A little of both, I think. Not to
Yeah,
sound too political, but it always happens, no matter when you put solo and ensemble in the year, um, it's always going to be a pain. I mean,
yeah.
it's just a pain. But I've run into so many band directors when I go and work their group, and they're a concert band, and then they'll complain about how their band doesn't play well and they don't listen to each other and they have problems with tuning and so forth. And I'll just offhand just kind of go, "Do you do solo and ensemble stuff with the kids?" And they'll go, "No, no, we're just way too busy, and we don't even do that. I have like one kid do a flute solo this year, And it's
Yeah.
well, it's kind of like a football team that doesn't go to the weight room."
Well, it does feel like a logistical. I mean, you're just adding. It's like you're organizing an event,
Hmm.
and sometimes I think, and let's just be real with it as we get started. Sometimes it's just more than some people want to deal with.
Yeah.
I'm asking.
And
I'm the
no, no, you're right. And it's a very I don't have the best way to put it. It's a very complex, deep dive into music for all these different instruments. It's
okay.
absolutely frightening for a lot of directors. Me being a brass player, and I'm looking for a class two clarinet solo for some kid, then now I've got to, if I try to do it myself, I'm going to screw up, and pick the wrong thing. So then I have to call somebody else, and that takes time. And I'm not saying it's not worthwhile time, but it takes time. And then I'm using up someone else's time. And, so it's just a situation that makes it really hard to get the kids to do it sometimes. And even if you do get them to do it, I tell you one thing to kind of right out of the cage, it's hard to get kids to play class three and class two events because their mind is set on, well, if I can't have a chance of going to state solo contest, I don't want to mess with this. And you're looking at a trumpet player or a flute player who's a freshman,
Yeah.
and they don't take privately, and they're a great kid but a mediocre player, and there's no way they need to be playing a class one solo. So it is a sales job trying to say, well, no, why don't you do this one this year? Okay, you're right. It's just like being a pushy car salesman.
So, so let's define up front. I kind of think this is a good place to jump off
Okay.
because I talked to one of my friends who was 6A for a long time, and I asked him because I've had the question already this year. Hey, could you help me find a good? And I'll even show you how specific it can be. I need a class one solo, preferably for two mallets. I'm like, okay, because I'm not a percussion teacher. The questionnaire, I'm not a percussion teacher, and I don't know that we can handle forehand. So that's a pretty specific question. So I go to a
Yeah.
6A director and say, hey, what do you know? And he goes, I'm going to be honest with you. I never dealt with it. I had lesson teachers and I had middle school teachers who that's what they did. I really didn't ever mess with it.
Yeah.
Okay, I get that. But my point being, the question came from a 1A or a 2A director.
Hmm.
So we kind of have to, at 1A and 2A, teach all of the instruments. You don't get to say, all right, because I feel comfortable with this instrument, I'll help all of y'all, but everybody else, just do what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and then I'm going to, one more question, and I promise I will just get out of the way. it seems like I remember my teacher going, "Man, you can you got to ace this 3A because this is the way it is. You prove yourself." Yeah, I mean 3A, the class 3. You got to ace this class 3 and then you're going to ace that class 2 and then you'll be doing class 1s. But I guess the point I was trying to weave my way to is I'm not sure the state solo and ensemble part of it is that important to Derek. I think the exercise of the local,
Oh yeah,
regional solo and ensemble is really the most important part of it anyway. And the sales job might be because you're going to make us better by doing this process.
right. But then again, on the flip side of that, the most important part to a lot of the kids is, hey, do we get to go on a trip to such and such? And do I get to be at the state solo contest? Because state means something. It doesn't matter where you're
Sure,
at. And so, but you're absolutely correct. As a band
but I'm
director,
not.
the state contest is absolutely, I hate to say this, the
It's a
state contest
nightmare.
is absolutely a waste of time.
Oh
It's an
wow.
absolute
Okay.
waste of time because it's at the end of the year. The kids have already stopped rehearsing on that stuff, and they just go. They just go for the trip, and it's good PR for us as band directors. You know, quiet part out loud here. It's good
Yeah.
PR, but it results in no competitive advantage or no musical growth whatsoever to be at the state contest in solo and
Well,
ensemble. The
and
regional event is the only thing that really matters. You know.
but I also think it's an Derek, be careful. It feels like a waste of resources.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt.
The
There's
buses,
no
the
doubt.
motels,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the
But it's
special
it's
dinner.
but it's yeah, you're exactly, man. You've been on the same trips as I've been. You know, you do the special dinner at the little steakhouse, and
Right.
it's a great reward for the kids. So I hate to, it's a waste of time as far as growing musicianship. It's a good use of time as far as public relations, rewarding students who have worked hard, giving them a little something something where they can feel like they did something cool. And it is a cool contest. I mean, but man, you talk about jumping into a buzzsaw. You can make a one at region and then pull a five at state
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
because they'll just annihilate you. You know, so right now, kind of off on a tangent, there's a move. You know how concert contests has moved earlier and earlier? They keep
I
moving it
do.
earlier.
Right.
Uh, they're talking in terms of, can we move the state solo contest earlier? Can we move the solo contest regional after concerts and sight reading and leave the state contest where it's at? So, and to me, that would be a really cool solution because you'd
Sure.
finish up all your concert stuff like before spring break, and then you could pass out solos and ensembles and get the kids working. Then state would be a very musical event because the kids would go right to there, just like region marching to area marching to state. They go directly to the next level of competition, which I think is a genius idea. But
Yeah.
right now, they'll shy away from doing solo and ensemble because right now, what is every director thinking about when the instead of solo and ensemble? Man, we got to get ready for concert contest. And right now, our system is that it all happens at the same time. It used to not be that way, Derek. Remember the good old
Right.
days?
I do remember.
You know, we'd have
Yeah.
concert contest on April 20th,
Right.
you know. So, but now some have March or February 28th or February 26th, I think is the
Oh
earliest contest I
man.
saw. And I'm judging one the last weekend of February. And the directors are ready and the kids are ready, but it piles everything up. You know,
Yeah.
it's all of a sudden you've got this kid working on a solo and you're getting on to them about getting their sectionals done. So, you know, I kind of ramble a little bit, but yeah, there is a scheduling problem that we've got to figure out to make our state level contest uh, more productive musically for the kids.
Okay. So now I've voiced my opinion and heard yours about
Is that
about
a little
the end.
brutal?
So let's reel all our friends back in. We do support you, and we are excited for this time of year. And Mike, tell me some of the benefits of solo and ensemble.
Oh my gosh, the real benefits is the fact that the kids in a solo situation, the kids learn how to play a solo with either piano accompaniment or recorded accompaniment, which both ways have their pros and cons. But they learn how to tune better because it's them versus the accompaniment. In an ensemble, they get to listen to each other.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh! And they're just in a small, like a trumpet trio or a brass quartet or a woodwind trio or whatever, and it just makes it to where they get to exercise those musical muscles that get ignored a lot of times in concert contest prep because they get
sure.
swallowed up in the big monster of the concert band. So they're like, I just play my notes, nothing but the notes. So help me God.
Right.
You know,
So
that's what
so
I'm going to do.
they get the opportunity to kind of go under a not a microscope, not in an examination way, but to actually have a chance to go, okay, here we are in an ensemble, and this is going to make that full big band better
Oh
because I learned
yeah.
how to do this.
Yeah, definitely. And so I've been guilty, very guilty in my younger years, especially of just handing out ensembles and solos and letting them figure it out for themselves. So, okay, I've got a piano player. Yeah, yeah.
I've been a
Here's the big,
participant in it.
here's the big giant folder. Figure out what you want to do for a trombone quartet. Okay, and so
Right.
they would just go through and find something, and it kind of worked because you've got some really smart kids in the band program, and they can figure it out, especially now with access to YouTube and lots of resources to hear things. We didn't have that back in the day. So they're smart. They figure it out really quick. But, I've kind of come together and kind of figured out some things to do that kind of help out the kids.
Okay.
So that's kind of the goal today is to maybe give some processes that maybe can help directors help lead their students the right direction.
Cool. And I'm going to stress one last time as you wind up, we are supporters, advocates for solo and ensemble,
Oh yeah,
despite despite what
yeah,
we said at the beginning. But let's focus on. I'm talking to our friends that are listening. What we might be saying is, it would be good to focus on. Don't worry about the state aspect of it. That might be part of your
yes,
sales pitch.
yes,
So, but we
yeah.
do advocate for solo and ensemble.
Oh, there's no doubt we advocate for it. I just have issues with how the state situation's set up.
Sure.
It's with scheduling, and it's so far apart that the kids don't even care anymore. They just go and eat pizza sometimes. And some are real gung ho, and they'll win. I've had kids win outstanding performing medals. At the state
Yeah.
contest, and those kids, it did produce great results for them.
And I'm going to
Most of
ask
the
you one
kids,
last thing. As you move into this, is in your experience, because you have friends everywhere, is this a decidedly different thing in Texas than it might be in other parts of the nation as
I think
far
it's
as
more. I think it's more ignored in Texas.
oh really?
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Okay.
If you go to other parts of the country, this is another thing that might draw some blowback on it. But in other parts of the country, they teach music. In Texas, we tend to teach performance. There's a
Ouch.
difference. There's a
Ouch.
difference, and I wholeheartedly, that's exactly what I do. I teach music, but primary sources we want to have the kids perform as an ensemble. So you'll see in other states sometimes the bands might not be as strong as an ensemble as the Texas bands.
Right.
Okay. But the individual musicians understand music history. They understand music theory. They do a lot of solo and ensemble work. They write music. And we kind of a broad brush here, broad brush. In Texas, we kind of pushed through that. And we did New World Symphony on the field one year. And not one kid knew that Antonin Dvorak wrote the thing. Yeah, we never discussed it. It's like, this is what we're playing. And, in other states, they might go in and have each kid submits a paper about the
A
composer
biography. Yeah.
and kind of study the theory behind it and how he brought in folk music from Eastern Europe into this situation in the New World. But in Texas, it's like, what? Well, we got to play these notes, man. Go.
It's
So
also
that's a
funny
really
to me.
broad brush. So I don't mean that to be for every director out there, but I raise my hand as guilty. We
But
pushed performance more so than,
you could play New World Symphony, and if you ask them if they knew what it was, they'll probably tell you what movie they heard that from.
yeah, or
As
they'd
a,
say, oh yeah, Phantom Regiment. Yeah. Yeah.
all right,
Yeah. All right.
I've
So
distracted you enough.
no, 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 it's fine. It's fine. But yeah, make me say all these quiet parts out loud. But as musicians, as band directors, we really need to kind of push that. Some ideas. I would definitely give the students the full score if they're doing an ensemble.
Okay.
If let's say they're doing a clarinet trio, I always copy off the full score to give to them, and then they can take a highlighter pen and highlight their part because they will learn it twice as quick,
Oh wow. Okay.
and they'll understand what the other people have instead of having their tiny part of the jigsaw puzzle. They see the entire
Okay.
puzzle. It's almost like the difference of putting a jigsaw puzzle together without the front of the box compared
Yeah,
to having the
without the
front of the
picture.
box. Yeah, yeah. It's like, well, here's all the pieces. Figure out what this puzzle is. So I find that to be very, very helpful. I usually prefer to introduce students to ensemble playing with like instruments You know what I mean? So sometimes it's
I
better
was
to
going to
do a
ask you that. Yeah.
trombone trio and a flute trio and a trumpet quartet and a percussion ensemble. That seems to be the a more gentle way of
Okay.
approaching it.
Especially if you're going to hand them a score.
Yes, yeah,
So
yeah. If it's like for a brass quintet, and then all of a sudden they got five parts to deal with in different keys, you know,
transposition, right?
in transposition. But even as simple as knowing that, oh, that's when the second part comes in. When I
That's
play
true.
this half note of measure 41, that's when on the upbeat of one, that's when she comes in and he comes in on count three because they can see it on the music in front of them.
Right.
That I think highlighters are really helpful in that. They can read directly off the score. And I've even had some groups get so ingrained into that process that they actually take those copies of the score to contest, and that's what they play off for contest is the actual the trio written out, and they have to do a lot of page turning. They have to
Yeah.
figure it out. But I've had groups do that before as well. Okay. Another item is make sure to set up a rehearsal schedule with them. They they want to do well, or they wouldn't have signed up in the first place.
Right.
But if you just leave it up to them to figure out when to rehearse, generally they just won't get around to it. And all of a sudden, and all my director friends out there can attest to this when, hey, why don't y'all come in and it's 2 weeks till contest. Why don't y'all come in and play that for me? We haven't rehearsed yet.
Right.
Oh, yeah. So help them take some time. And again, it takes time, but, or have at least maybe have one of the students in the ensemble sit down with the ensemble, make it a rehearsal schedule and turn it into you. That might be the most time efficient way of doing it. Okay. Um,
Well, I think the short version of that, just to make our bullet point, if you leave it up to them, they won't.
Yeah, yeah, they won't because it's just like when the superintendent tells me to do something. When do I have to do this? When are you going to get mad at me if I don't do
How
this?
far can I push this
How
back?
far can I go until I do it? So I'm not blaming children and students per se, it's just human nature. Okay.
Right.
And even if you don't pass out the whole score, at least to the bare minimum, have them mark in the entrances of other parts. Like Sam comes in here and Jose comes in here and whatever. Just mark their
Okay.
parts
So
where they can see it.
I'm going to listen. I'm not trying to assume anybody's as dumb as I am, but I am. When you say that, are you saying on your part you're going to make, like almost like a breath mark or just an arrow that says
Yeah, I
first part
use
comes in
arrows.
here
Yeah.
or second part comes here or,
And the
you
way I
know,
generally have them do it is use the first letter of their name, unless it's two names of the same first letter. But you
Sure.
figure out some kind of code where it's like S arrow, J arrow, where they
Sure.
can see it on their part. So it's not real complicated. It doesn't look real messy. And that doesn't have to be every entrance, but you get some spots in those little ensemble pieces and they get kind of cloudy, as
Yeah.
far as when does everybody going to come in? And other spots are really blocked out. Everybody just plays all the time and life is good.
Right. Okay.
And if you can have the possibility to do this, provide access to a recording beforehand. We have technology for it. Sometimes when I go judge solo and ensemble, so I'm doing about, I guess, two this year, solo and ensemble contest. Sometimes they'll play a piece and I'll just ask them offhand at the end, said, hey, how many recordings did you listen to of this? And it's amazing how few recordings the kids ever listened to, and it's a might be a student who played pretty well, by the way,
Right.
but stylistically, it was just obvious they had not listened to any sort of recording that, this piece by Mozart is not really in the style of the era of when Mozart lived,
Sure.
and it's like, and the trills are even wrong; they're backwards. You know what I mean? So it's like,
I do.
did you listen to a recording? And they go, no. So, oh, okay. Well, I would suggest listen to recordings. You did a really good job today. Played really well on this, and sometimes I'll even be a softie and award the first division, but I'll write in real big, please listen to recordings for reference, not to learn by rote. There's a
Right.
difference. You know what I mean? But for reference to hear it so they know what it's supposed to sound like, you know.
That's one of those fun questions. You really don't even need the full answer. When you ask it, you just watch their face.
Yeah.
When, when they give you the what? Hmm?
Yeah. But there's so much stuff on YouTube and so many recordings out there that, you can even give a link. What we did, and this takes some time. I had some librarians help me with this that were in the band, but we took all the accessible solos that we generally use in ensembles and we photocopied them. and we put them in binders. And on the side of the binder, it'd say like trumpet class two. And the kids could use those.
Right.
Okay. Now, when they would open them, if they wanted to play that solo, then the job of the librarian, the kids never took anything out of that folder. So then the librarian would take that piece of music and copy it for them and give them the copy of the copy. And then the originals were stored like in Fort Knox. The originals were
Yeah.
never touched by human hands. I'd like put it was like being in the Vatican Library or something. You know what I mean? Those
Right.
those things stayed there. But what I was getting to is I would always put at the bottom, I would put the YouTube link if I could
Okay.
find one. I'd stick it there. And now, granted, it's on a piece of a copied paper. They have to type it all out. But once they
Right.
got it into their device, they could just always access that. It might be the Canadian Brass, might be, I don't know, it might be some of our kids. We would
Right.
have them play and make a YouTube recording, and have it as our own
That's cool,
resource
man.
was our band kids,
Yeah.
playing a certain solo. Have Will Miller play a class three trumpet solo and record them
That's
because
funny.
he could learn it in 2 days. So
Will
I
came in
think
the
that
store the other day. Will
he
came in our
did.
store the other day,
Yeah, yeah.
and it took everything I was going to walk up and go, you're podcast famous.
That's right. That's right.
We talk about you all the time
Yeah, we do. And most of the time it's good, Will. Most of the
in a
time it's
positive
good.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Another item that gets forgotten, and I'm just saying this as one who's made these mistakes with my kids, and also as someone who judges a lot of contests, and I see it happen. Teach them how to properly set up for their ensemble.
Yeah, I think that's
Oh
really
my
important. Yeah.
goodness. You'll have a brass quintet come in and they'll set up in a straight line all faced
Straight
at you.
line.
With the tuba player on one end and the trumpet on the other end, and you're going, it'll work. But man, life is that how they practiced? And a lot of times I'll ask them, and they'll actually answer correctly. I'll say, "Is this how you practice each time?" Oh, no. Usually we put the tuba on this end or the tuba in the middle. We put the trombone on this side and trumpet on this. And I go, "Oh,
Why didn't you do
why don't you go ahead and do that now?" They go, "Oh, we can do that?" So, yeah,
that?
because they'll come in, whatever it'd be a weird psychological experiment, but I think you could set up the five chairs any way you wanted to as a judge. And sometimes the kids would never move them. They would come in
Not
and just
move them
sit
once.
down and they'd face the wall. Go,
Right.
guys, listen. So, teach them how to do that because it's something that their mind is, occupied. They're under pressure. I look
Just
at it as
say,
not very pressure oriented, but to a freshman going to solo contest, it is a lot of pressure.
well, that's what I was going to say this, referencing what you just said about they won't touch anything, they won't move anything,
Yeah. Yeah, they won't
because it
adjust
feels
stands.
like you feel like you're going to the principal's office if somebody hasn't explained to you, this guy's
Yeah.
not here to tell you how bad you are,
Yeah.
or this
It'd be like
lady's
going to the
not going
principal's
to.
office and arranging the pens and pencils on his desk. Walking
Yeah.
over, well, let's get this set up for you, sir.
Right.
But you're
And
exactly
it's
right.
that 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 the she is not there to raise her eyebrows, roll her eyes, shake her head. Oh my gosh, what do you got? They're there to
Yeah.
encourage and be fair about stuff. Here's what we can do better
Yeah. And you can preach it to them, and it's hard for them to wrap their brain around it. But their biggest fan is that judge. They
every
want
time.
so badly for them to be great. You know what I
Right.
mean? I just want it to be so amazing so I can just talk about how wonderful you are and how your community and your band is so lucky to have you in their program. And thank you for your hard work. You made my day today. Man,
Right.
I would rather write that any day than, it'd be better if we used the right notes on this particular solo. So and we need to actually play in tune and listen to the accompaniment. We weren't together at all throughout that entire, and
Right.
you just don't want to go down that road when it's the truth, but you got to.
Right.
If it's
But I
you do
think
it more politically correct, but
the conversation early in the process is this is a good experience. This is a you're not going into I just think they go into tense sometimes
yes,
with the assumption that this somebody's just going to be looking for everything wrong.
yeah,
And I don't know that as directors we don't teach that way sometimes that oh man, you're still doing bad things, you're doing bad things. It's as
yeah,
opposed to what you said, here's the style, here's maybe if we do this it clicks. So I'll
yeah. No, you're right. Guilty as charged on this side
my simple
because
point being encourage. Yeah.
yeah, because there's times when I'll be working in ensemble and going, and I'll catch myself saying things like, "Well, the judge is not going to like that breath mark right there,"
Right.
instead of to be more musical, let's not have a breath mark right there, because I'm guilty of that. I'll get into their brains a little bit where they're thinking, oh, what's the judges? We're supposed to worry about the judge. We're worried about what the judge is thinking. We should be kind of addressing our things as far as this is how we play the best as a musician, instead of oh the judge isn't going to like that. Oh the
Right.
judge is going to So just be careful with that. And I'm guilty even in concert contest and marching
Yeah.
band
Okay.
throwing things out there. Another thing that's it almost gets comical sometimes, and I hate to say it that way, but give them a tuning procedure. What pitches to tune on, what to listen for, how to adjust. I don't know how many times I've heard an ensemble come in and they just kind of look at each other, and I go, and I'll be writing the sheet from before from the group that just left, and I'll say, oh, I'm still finishing up this sheet. Feel free to tune or warm up, and they'll all just look at each other like, what do we do? You'll hear them
So what?
whisper, what do we do? What do we do? Oh, play concert F. Okay. Play concert F. Okay. Okay. What else should we play? Should we play something else? And I'm sitting there writing. It's almost like I'm chuckling to myself, going, "These kids, wonderful players, But it's like they've never taken time to figure out, what are we supposed to do? So literally give them, write it out. That
Right.
first trumpet or whoever you're going to tune to, the tuba, whatever the case is, you're going to tune to that best player in the ensemble, and they're going to play a certain pitch, and you're going to match that pitch, and work it out. Or simply as far as tuning to the piano, if you're using a
Right.
piano accompaniment. I had a student come in, and there was into the first of 10 or 15 students that came in, and they played their brass instrument, and they said, okay, I said, well, go ahead and tune to the piano. And it was about a quarter step off. The piano really wasn't well in tune. And I said, they were going to start. I didn't see him move anything. I said, oh, aren't you going to adjust to the piano? Because I'll help him. I said, hey,
Right.
you're really sharp. You need to pull out a little bit. And he goes, oh, no, our slides were soldered by our band director. He tuned them at the beginning of the year.
You're kidding me.
So all 10 or 15 players came in, and there's a little tiny solder place on their tuning slide because they'd already been tuned in August.
Right.
And here we are in February tuning to a piano. But I
I
just
for,
go, just play. Just
I
play. It's
forgot
okay.
that's a one-time experience. You don't have to.
That's right. It's like fixing a roof with a hammer and nail and a board.
But the other thing that does for those kids is a lot of times we do this in a high school room that's empty and there's echo and there's
Hmm.
acoustics they're not used to. Just even if they're in tune, allowing them to blow a note to hear what it's going to sound like in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and you
So,
took the words out of my mouth because I'll say, do y'all want to warm up and hear what it sounds like in here? And the really sharp ones who have been prepared by the directors, or they're just smart enough to know what to do, they'll take advantage of it. They'll pick out like letter C in their solo and play the big
right,
part, and just so they can hear the reverb or lack of reverb, just so they know, so it's not just rude awakening when they start playing their horn.
right. Okay, cool.
Another item to kind of think about, look over the music, especially in these trios. Look over the music before you assign parts. Sometimes the third part's the hardest part.
You know, I,
It has the most technique, so you got to tell your all-state clarinet player, said, we really need you to play third part on this because it has the most technique because it's a violin trio or something. You know
right.
what I mean? So the third part is just a monster. So don't
See,
just assume that the hardest part is the first part.
I think that horn players are used to that concept, but that the difficulty doesn't go with the number.
Yeah, or the range. Yeah.
Right. But good point. I would have never thought of that.
Yeah. That's why you asked me to be here.
But I was, I'm first chair. I'm going to play the first part.
Yeah, first chair always plays first part. And I've had ensembles where multiple movements in an ensemble where they'll switch parts between movements because it might be a range issue.
Oh, wow.
If it's a
Okay.
trombone trio and it has three movements and they have to play all three movements, you probably don't want the first kid on first part for three movements in a row because all three of the kids can play trombone.
Right.
They're generally about the same level of musicianship. So, and if they're not, maybe you need to pick a different piece. You know what I mean? If they're not, if you have one really good trombone and two kind of mediocre, you might not
Right.
find a piece with three movements. Where
Right.
that first player is just screeching away for the whole thing. Um, I think another thing to add to that, determine for them, or let them determine it, who's in charge of the piece to start it.
Let them think they determined it.
Yeah, exactly. Because they'll in rehearsal, they'll count real loud for each other. Okay, one and two and ready, go, or one and
Yeah.
two and three, and they'll play. And then they get in the room and they kind of freak out because they're thinking, I don't think we can do that here. You know
Right.
what I mean? So teach them how to properly start. If it's a whisper count off, if it's simply the one player motioning with their horn
Yeah, that's how I
to
always
bring
did it.
you in. Yeah. So if you can get them to do it without verbally counting off, I think it's really cool. But it's not
Yeah.
totally necessary, but it's really cool.
But
It just looks so professional.
another reason to sit up correctly so everybody can see that guy.
That's right. And if they're looking at that guy or that girl, make sure they memorize the first measure so they're not just
Yeah.
coming in and on whatever note kind of happens to be there. Okay. Hopefully that process will be taught in younger grades, even beginning band. You know, uh, Also another one. This is a critical one. Teach them what to do if they fall apart.
I agree. I agree.
Because I've had groups make first divisions that had a big glitch in the middle, but everything else was really, really good and they recovered really well. So if it just falls apart, tell them just stop. One person's in charge. He goes, letter L. And they just
Right.
start again instead of all looking at, well, what do we do? What do we do? Can we go back to the beginning? Can we, they start asking the judge questions, well, what
Right.
do we do now? I said, and then of course, I'll be gentle because, man, I'm trying to encourage them. It's like, well, I tell you what, let me just count you off and let you start. Okay. One and two and ready at L. Boom. And let them
Yeah.
play. But, teach them what to do when they fall apart because they don't practice that in rehearsal. They just
Right.
fall apart. And then someone goes, let's start again,
Yeah.
you know and
I agree.
emphasize to the students start some of your practices as an ensemble, practice just the last part of the ensemble. Don't always start at the beginning because almost every ensemble I hear in judging competition, they start really strong and they get weaker and weaker and weaker
Tapers
and
off.
weaker
Yeah.
because they start at the beginning every time, so the beginning's always the strongest. We're humans. Okay, so sometimes start at the very end and play the last 8 measures, then play the last 16 measures, then play the last 24 measures. And like building with Legos, just keep backing up in the ensemble so you can get that last
Right.
part in.
Well, I will tell you this too that, and maybe this was just my experience, but a lot of times when we learn solos or when we learn ensembles, I was taught to start at the end and let's play that last measure.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't do that.
And now
You
let's
were
play the
you were
last
taught by
four.
some really smart people. Yeah, because a lot of directors don't do that. They just give them the music and the kids just practice it over
So
and
I
over.
guess my question is that a valid technique? Is that
Oh
a
yeah,
good thing to do?
I think it's great. There was a couple of football seasons in our marching show. We started with the third part, and we'd play the last part of the show at the first game, and then we'd back
Okay.
up each week and add music and drill till we got to the beginning of the show, which was about 3 weeks before contest. And I
Sure.
don't know why I veered away. Well, I know why I veered away from that because it was really hard to figure out how to get on the field
Sure. It's
because you had a
probably
different starting position every game. So I said, I
everybody
don't want
run
to.
to your set.
Yeah, I don't want to deal with that anymore. But
Yeah.
musically, it was very good for us because the ending of the
Yeah.
show was spectacular. So you start kind of mediocre maybe, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and you leave that taste in the judge's mouth of that's a really good group. And the same
Right.
thing works with our little tiny ensembles. Always have them be aware of the melody. Mark it. We would mark things with highlighters. Just know that who has the melody. In your
Right.
part, mark it in yellow if you have the melody. Just highlight the notes. Other people say, put when they don't have the melody, so and so has the melody. Derek has melody.
So
Because those ensembles, it's thrown around.
Mr. Richardson's saying holds true. It's the baby.
That's right.
You either have it or you protect it, right? You project
That's
it or
right. You
protect it.
project if you have the melody, project it. If you don't have the melody, protect it.
Right.
Because it's so easy to overplay the melody, especially in a trio. It really is more so than in a band. Okay, in a full ensemble.
Sure.
Um, if it's an ensemble and like instruments, kind of going back to what we mentioned way earlier, one thing I like about that is they can all play through every part in unison if you've given them the score.
That's true.
So the whole ensemble can play first clarinet and play it. Whole ensemble can play second clarinet and play it. Whole ensemble play third clarinet. And they can even play the bass clarinet part if it's a
Yeah.
quartet, and then they can go and divide parts, and it gives them an appreciation and a knowledge of what the other players are doing. Okay.
Well, it's
Um,
understanding that this is going to be happening at this time, at this time, at this time. This
yeah.
is where you have that cool part. Yeah.
Yeah, and they know where the cool part is because they played that cool part.
All right.
It's like, hey, here comes that cool part I wish I had.
Yeah.
So it makes it where they understand the whole thing. Okay, and this sounds real, and I know that some of my compadre out there are not anti metronome, but they get tired of listening to a metronome. But teach them how to use a metronome properly in an ensemble situation. Set it at a tempo where they can play their parts, then gradually inch it up as time goes by. But I've never had this happen. But don't come in the room with a metronome when you're trying
Right. No, no, no. I
to
get it.
play. But it's great for that. Make them aware of how to handle transitions. They might not know how to do a fermata, a caesura, or a tempo change. They might not know exactly what they're supposed to do, and they just kind of haphazardly fall through transitions when the main parts of the music sound really good, but those transitions might be enough to pull them down a rating.
Sure.
So encourage them not only to practice the end of the piece, but practice all the transitions. Don't start at the beginning of the new main theme that happens at measure 48. Tell them to start 8 measures before that, get to the fermata, then breathe, then go into that.
Again, find a recording
Yeah, find a recording. Yeah,
and
but you've
listen
got to
how they do
practice the
that.
transitions. Yeah, you got to
You,
practice
you
those
understand what I mean, though.
transitions. Oh yeah, yeah. And it helps in the recordings. And again, I want to emphasize, I'm not saying give them a recording and they just play by
Learn by
ear
rote.
and
Yeah.
yeah, learn by rote. That's not the. But we're in a medium in which it's like learning another language. In music.
Agreed.
And if you're trying to teach someone how to speak Spanish or French or Latin, um, they've got to have some sort of model and recording to hear what Spanish say. If someone's never heard Spanish in their lifetime, which unbelievable here in Texas because it's like our second language. You know what I
Right.
mean? And even me as saying I don't speak Spanish, I understand a lot of Spanish. You know what I mean? Because it's just I just hear it all the time. I think it's cool. But if you've never heard Spanish and you just explain to them on paper how to speak Spanish, that's going to be a disaster.
Yeah. I'm just gonna say this because it popped in my head.
Yeah,
In Texas, we understand it's not Taco Villa
that's right.
because we've heard it our whole life that
That's
it's
right.
Via. But
We've heard it, and you're right. And if we didn't have that verbal input from someone else, we would say Taco Villa. You know,
tortilla.
because that's yeah tortilla. Because that's how in our learning system that's how we did it. Because in our schools we teach Spanish as a second language. You know what I
Right.
mean?
I
So
do.
it just so music's the same way. They've got to hear it after they've learned some of the notes, hear it so they can absorb. Oh, that's what that's. That's what. How long we hold the fermata. Oh, that's how much we change tempo. Right. That's the idea.
Right.
And it's ingenious and it's so simple. you know, just find recordings and kids are so smart nowadays. Just send them on a mission. Said I want you to find 5 recordings of this, and sometimes it's hard because some of those pieces are kind of hidden. They're
Right.
they're not like big band and orchestra pieces. And they can find them. They'll find some college in New Hampshire that someone did a recital and that was on there. And they'll
Right.
search it out. They're like pirates looking for the treasure chest.
Right. And it takes a lot of the work off you.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll say the quiet part real quick.
yeah, yeah. Well, and if the kids enjoy doing it, oh my gosh, let them do it. Performing ensembles like this can be one of the best learning experiences for these kids. It can also be some of the worst. You know,
I agree.
they learn to take ownership, team building skills, listening skills, score and part reading skills, and so many other things. One problem I find that when I did ensembles, I would have students I would ask them to do ensembles, but they had to choose their ensemble members
Okay.
for one important reason. I did not want to take all the flack and all the complaining if someone decided they couldn't be at the contest and their trio folded.
Yeah.
I would tell them, said, you'd better know who's in your ensemble and you better know your schedules because if you come to me, I'm not going to have any sympathy whatsoever, because they'll literally the day of contest go, well, 3 out of the 4 of us are here. Can we still go ahead and play it? The answer is no by UIL rules in Texas.
Right.
You cannot. And so if it was early enough, I'd help them sub a person in, but they'd better know if this is a kid that's playing third trombone in a trio and he's missed 4 football games and and 20
Right.
rehearsals and they chose him because it's their best friend,
Right.
another life skill learned. Learn
Well,
who you
and
can depend on.
I will say that I think that our education system has kind of graduated to where we do a lot of team activities, or even in our education, like, whether it's a research project or I know one
Yeah.
of the things when I was taking some classes later in life, I was like, even in an online class, they were like, you guys group up because your group is going to do this aspect. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Who can I depend on? More so
that
than
I've
who's
never
the most
met.
intelligent person. Yeah, that you've never met. So these kids, at least they kind of know each other. You know what I
Right.
mean? They've seen it, so that kind of helps out. So I just want to really push the point that if you want your band to play better, you have to have some sort of system instilled in the students of how to do solo and ensemble. Work out a situation to where you try to sell to the freshmen or some of the weaker players that can do a class three, or even a senior can play a class two solo, you
Right.
know. And so if they just would like to participate, be on their side. Just say, no, you don't have to play a class one solo. So I just want to play a solo. I just want to be better at what I do. Oh man, that's amazing. Let's get this going. And there used to be a time, it wasn't that long ago, you played a class three as a freshman, then you made a one. If you played a class two and made a one, then you had to go to a class one solo. There was no turning back. If you made a
Yeah.
one on a class two, you had to go up. That doesn't exist anymore. So they can play a class two their sophomore, junior, senior year, and I'm perfectly fine with that. With the accompaniment things, that's probably one of the hardest things, believe it or not, is figuring out how to get accompaniment parts. You
Yeah.
know, some people use smart music. Some people use recordings of. They have a pianist come out and sit in their studio and make recordings of the solos and ensembles. That works pretty well. The problem is when the student gets away from the recorded accompaniment.
Right.
There's no, I mean, we've got some really
No
great
flexibility.
accompanists. No flexibility. I mean, I've had some really good accompaniment people. Shirley Anderson plays piano here in Abilene. She could chase a kid like a rabbit down a hole. They'd be in a
Yeah.
whole different part of the solo, and she would just smile and just. Mark Sanders is in town here, and he does. I call it the Mark Sanders sniff because whoever gets lost, he'll just play and play, and he'll look at him and go, and then the kid just goes, boom. He just directs
Yeah.
him right back into the right part. So there's that thing.
Yeah.
It's the problem is that piano playing is kind of turning into a lost art,
I agree.
And I'll just throw this out there, man. When I was in high school as a freshman and a sophomore, we played the accompaniments for each other. There were enough of us that played piano that I would play for
Right.
six freshmen. There's solos, and a friend of mine, Tim Adcock, who's an accountant here in Abilene now. He's a retired accountant. He played for my class one solos, and I don't ever remember someone from outside the band playing accompaniment parts because it seemed like everyone took piano because we
Right.
just did. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but we're in a time now where that doesn't occur. So that's a big challenge, especially in
Yeah.
1A, 2A when you're 40 miles away from any kind of larger city where
Sure.
your piano player just might be Aunt Betty who plays at the Baptist church and knows like 15 hymns and can play them really, really well, but is going to have trouble with the Hindemith trumpet sonata. you know, so it's that's a challenge out there for my friends, and I do respect and appreciate that.
Yeah.
So do what you can. If you have to use recordings, use recordings. I would say though, if you use recordings, ask and pay for the accompanist to do it at like three different tempos if it's a
Okay.
fast piece. So the kids have like a beginner level, intermediate level, and what we're shooting for level. And if they only get to the intermediate, have that play that recording at contest. Only play it as fast as you can actually play it.
Here, I was going to say, play it as fast as you can play it well. How many
Yeah,
times have I heard that?
yeah. Or
So,
as Percy Granger would say, play as fast as possible, but no faster. I always thought that was a
what a
great,
great quote.
a great quote on the music. He'd have that written on the music. Play as fast as possible, but not faster.
Yeah.
So
All
that's kind
right.
of my thoughts on solo and ensemble. So now that they've got everything figured out, now we can have all these kids going to solo contests, and our
Right.
bands will
But
be
let's
better, and the kids will be better.
revisit real quick.
Okay.
Solo and ensemble will make your group better.
Yes.
Quit avoiding it. It will make your group better. Solo and ensemble doesn't have to be uh, I almost liken it to jury in college. You're like, you know what's coming and you really don't want to do it, but you got to do it. It's not, it doesn't have to be that way. Look, I'm going to ask you this last and I'll let it go. I think it's on us as teachers to create a positive vibe about
Yes.
solo and ensemble because it's something you're doing outside of what we normally do. It's a chance for you to work on something different than the same stuff that we work on in classroom every day. I've
Yeah.
seen guys and tell me if you think this is good or not. I think it's good. They'll actually have like a little recital before solo and ensemble where all the groups get to play for each other and everybody goes, "Oh wow, that's awesome. You
Yeah.
guys are
That is
doing
cool.
great."
Yeah.
So,
I never did that, but I should have. But I know groups that do that, and I think it's brilliant because the kids have a different kind of pressure performance,
right.
but still it's kind of a more of a fun performance. You get to show off for
Sure.
people.
And it's not like there's a sense of I did this. Somebody else can appreciate how much we've done before you go in to face that empty classroom and a judge. So
Right. That's exactly
cool.
right.
Man, I appreciate you bringing this up. I think it's something that we don't think about all the time. It's one, again, I think so many of us look at it as a necessary evil. There's a lot of logistics involved, and as a host of one of these, you're like, lots to do while we're thinking about other things,
Yeah.
but so important.
Yeah. It
All right,
is.
man. Well, I'm going to go memorize my class one solo again.
Yeah, I'm going to go
Fun.
work on the Artunian trumpet concerto because someday I'm going to be able to play it.
Still in the goals, still in the
Still, I've
bucket
got a
list.
goal. I've got a goal.
All right, brother. Man, have a great week.
You too. We'll check you later, Derek.